guys good with the feed? I'm waiting for Steve. Is it good with the feed, Mike?
Mike, with the feed. He's good?
Okay. Good afternoon, how are you? Basically, what I talked to court administration about, they've been kind enough to surpass the administrative order where I can answer some questions for you. I've pretty much ignored you as much as possible throughout the trial, so I apologize for that. What I'd like to do is I'm not going to give a statement, nothing formal. Basically, I know there's some members of different outlets, news channels. You can have about 1 or 2 questions each. I'll answer them the best I can, or if I can, just to respect right now, we don't have a jury yet, so I really want to respect the answers that I may give or may not give. So if I don't answer the question, I apologize for that. And you guys can pretty much, I don't know if you want to go from right to left, you're the media, it's your call.
Cory, Angela Cory has a reputation for overcharging. It happened in George Zimmerman, it's happening in Marissa Alexander, she's been criticized. Do you think your client is a victim of being overcharged?
Is that the warning shot case?
The Marissa Alexander is the one.
Yes. Is that the same one when Mr. Guy asked my client if he fired a warning shot?
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a bit ironic. But that's neither here nor there. Again, in this case, I've said from day one, I think it was an overcharge. There was no premeditation. And granted, the law does allow no time limit on premeditation. I'm hoping the Supreme Court of Florida changes that for things like this. It has to be with malice and ill intent, and it wasn't. I think Mr. Dunn testified and was very straightforward and honest in answering the questions, not only for myself, but also with Mr. Guy. I think he was the most candid out of any witness on that stand. So, do I think they should have charged him with first degree? No, but again, it was a grand jury, and you can charge somebody with a grand jury with whatever you like.
Cory, did Rhonda's testimony about the gun at all damage the relationship between her and Michael Dunn?
No, and well, I can't say yes or no because obviously he's in custody, she's not. They have limited contact now. Throughout this entire trial, he's had a very good relationship with her on the phone. There's been a couple of jail visits. I can tell you this, the testimony was very clear. Ms. Rauer indicated that she was more composed on that witness stand than over a year ago when it happened. And I pointed out at least what Mr. Guy says, I made fun of her, which was ridiculous. But you could see she had to be escorted off the stand because of her emotional state. And I'm hoping the jury can see past that if that was her version of calm and composed, there's no way she's going to recall what my client said, all the words that he said. And again, with eyewitness testimony, it's what you recall. And I asked her on cross, is it possible he did and you don't recall it? And she indicated yes. So you can't change the facts. It is what it is. But I think the state overplayed that hand. I'm hoping the jury can see past that and see that her emotional state on the stand, if that was calm and collective, there's no way somebody could reasonably remember what you're saying or what goes on that night. Even my client indicated on cross-examination, he doesn't even remember half of the interrogation with police because it was such a blur and because of his mental state.
Your client seemed well prepared, even a little bit rehearsed. I wonder how you strategically sat with him and prepared for the questions that he got on stand and prepared to see his fiancée also.
Well, I don't think I could prepare him to see his fiancée because I didn't pre-trial her like the state attorney's office did. And I can assure you one thing, the state attorney's office rehearsed with their witnesses a whole lot more I did with Mr. Dunn. And I think that was clear to anybody. You could see that. Mr. Dunn was genuine. He was honest. And to say his testimony was rehearsed, I think you weren't watching the testimony.
Mr. Dunn, how is your client doing this morning? What is he doing? What is his state of mind?
What is he doing? He's sitting behind a courtroom in a jail cell waiting for the jury. How is he doing? This is the hard part. This is the hard part. It's the hard part for anybody. It's out of our hands. There's nothing we can do. You know, that's why I explained to the jury, once I sit down, I'm going to have a million more things to say to you. I'm going to be able to rebut what Mr. Guy says, but we can't. So he's in good spirits. He's holding up. I can tell you from day one, his attitude has been, we have the truth, we have the law, he'll prevail. And now it's in the jury's hands, and I have to respect that.
I think there's a lot that we don't know about your client. What can you tell us about Michael Dunn's background and his upbringing?
Well, I can tell you, as you saw from the family, very close-knit. I know there was a lot brought up about Mr. Dunn's son, Chris Dunn, and there's a lot nobody knows. There was a lot of things that, unfortunately, with evidence, we're not allowed to bring out because of the rules of evidence. I can tell you that his ex-wife and him made a decision because she was in North Florida, he was in South Florida. She got remarried. He was with somebody else. There was no child support issues. There was no domestic violence issues. I mean, you saw there was no bad blood. So the fact that he hadn't seen Christopher so often was based on a family decision with his ex-wife and himself, who had a great relationship. So there were times that he did see them, and unfortunately, I think the state tried to exploit that to try to show lack of character, and I'm hoping the jury can see past that. I'm hoping the jury will abide by the instruction of you cannot use sympathy or anger to convict someone, and I think honestly the state relied heavily in their closing argument on both.
Mr. Strolla,
Yes.
I'm wondering, in light of criticism that the state attorney's office faced after failing a conviction to secure a conviction against Mr. Zimmerman, do you think that they have invested, I guess, too many resources, or how do you address a case like this where there's so many resources at their hand that they're using on this case?
That might be a better question to ask Ms. Cory. You know, I can't really speak to that, but I think, and I personally believe, there's a lot vested in the outcome of this case politically. And I'm not saying anything for Ms. Cory. She can gladly speak for herself. But my personal belief, and I think I said it from the beginning, because of the George Zimmerman case, a lot more was focused on this case, where had we never heard about George Zimmerman, I don't think you or I would be standing in this room talking about Mr. Dunn.
Jurors have asked to watch all this surveillance tape. What does that tell you?
They told me they were listening to me because if you remember in closings, I asked them to do it. And you'll be able to see from different angles when Tommy Storns left that door, how long he was out before the first shot was fired. You'll also see their witness Stephen Smith leave and see how long he was out and see if it's possible that he could hear Mr. Dunn make alleged statements, even though he admitted he wasn't focusing that direction and he was parked on the other side. So there'll be things that came out that the state strategically played small portions of, and I'm glad the jury's going to look at it because they're going to see another side. They're going to see people inside talking and you can hear them clearly, which means when the police cut it off, it was before all the witnesses were inside that store. And I firmly believe had the police not cut it off and got afterwards, we would have heard what the witnesses were doing, where they were standing, and what they were talking about. And I think that will show that witnesses were talking about what was going on outside, which contributed to what they ended up telling homicide detectives later. Hold on one second, I'm sorry. She got skipped, go ahead.
You came in as the second attorney for Dunn.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you feel that you had to change your legal strategy coming in?
No, ma'am, I think I had to do some damage control because of the things that were put out in the media, but I did not have to change my strategy. From day one, talking to the Dunn family, meeting with Michael Dunn, we knew this was a clear-cut case of self-defense. We knew the evidence was there. And then finally, when I got the discovery from the state and I got to my depositions, I could see that the police and then the detectives did not investigate what they should have investigated. And to be honest, I think they thought this was just another typical shooting in Jacksonville, Florida. No offense to you guys in Jacksonville, but you have the dubious distinction of the murder capital of Florida, and I don't think the resources, like that gentleman said, went into the investigation, and I don't think they ever imagined that it was going to come to this. Yes, sir.
We've seen and heard a lot of the Davis family. What is the mindset and what's the state of mind of the Dunn family right now?
Thank you for asking about that. And I can tell you, I did talk to his mom and dad. They do want to clear some things up. They want to get out. But to be honest with you, I even asked them if they wanted just to read a statement. And Mr. Dunn's response to me was, you know, Cory, if I do that, I'm going to hysterically cry. So I can tell you their family is heartbroken. And that's no disrespect to the Davis. I understand they lost a son in this. But right now, you know, the Dunn family and the entire Dunn family is truly hanging with every second. And again, the mom and dad can't even talk about it without crying.
Cory, the Dunn family has run out of money based on my understanding. Angela Cory obviously has almost unlimited resources. Is this a fair fight in your mind? You're there by yourself. Angela Cory has 2 assistants and she can call her office and get 100 people on this if she wants to.
Well, it's 4 versus 1, but do I think it's fair? No, they could have used more.
I'm curious, can you define the difference between self-defense and stand your ground as the jury is deciding this?
It's a legal principle, and I see what you're saying. In Florida, the stand your ground is when you have a mini trial in front of just a judge, no jury. And it's an immunity hearing, and I think that's where the perception is being lost. Everyone keeps saying stand your ground, and if you heard the jury instructions, it says that Mr. Dunn was allowed to stand his ground and meet force with force. And then the media goes, oh, the word stand your ground. It's a different burden. In a pre-trial immunity hearing, The judge can determine by preponderance of the evidence that it was self-defense and throw the case out and never go to a jury. We strategically decided not to do it because of the media attention, because of the publicity, and because we did not want to give the state attorney's office a preview of what our defense and our questioning was going to be. Because basically, as a defense attorney, you've got to lay all your cards out on the table before it gets to trial. If the judge denies the hearing, you've got nothing left.
But the stand your ground law, because of the way it's written, doesn't actually have a timetable. You could actually bring that immunity hearing before the jury comes back. Any plan to do that?
At this point, no. At this point, again, based on the factors prior to this trial, we're confident that we have a fantastic jury. I'm hoping that we'll have a brave jury. They have a very hard decision to make, and I'm hoping they come back with the right decision.
You use the word brave. Why?
Again, you saw with Zimmerman, there were death threats to jurors, there was hate mail. One juror ran to do interviews and things like that. It's going to be a tough decision. And if somebody says that politics and race aren't going to be played in this, just look outside the front of that courthouse this entire last 2 weeks. It is, and it's unfortunate. And again, I want to be very clear. Nobody from my office or Mr. Dunn has brought race into this, period. Matter of fact, I filed a pretrial motion to keep it out because we don't want to taint that jury. We want to keep it clean. And matter of fact, I never identified a single witness by either the color of their skin or their gender. We identified names, and if you look at the state attorney's questions, they continually used, was it a black girl, a white girl, a black man? And I'm not saying anything against Angela Cory, she can speak for herself, but I wanted the record to be very clear that this was not about race. Matter of fact, Mr. Dunn made several phone calls that were you just using the media where he does believe there's a subculture. Mr. Dunn does believe that there are kids and youth out there that listen to this, what we call gangster rap or violent lyrics, and they see violent things on TV and then try to imitate it because they think that's fun or they think that's cool or they think that's the way you're supposed to act. And it's not black, it's not white, it's not Hispanic. It's literally a person trying to emulate something they've seen, and unfortunately it puts them in a very dangerous position if they do that. So,
is that what he thinks happened at the gas station?
He said that from day one, and had he had bond and been able to speak to the media, he would have told you from day one. Matter of fact, I can't tell you how many times he's said, this isn't a black and white issue, it's what he would call a subculture thug issue, and again, it doesn't go to race, it goes to how people behave and respond to situations.
From his jailhouse letters, even that were introduced, that seemed to be what we interpret as racial animus?
Well, and I see, don't forget, they introduced one letter.
Right.
They had all of his letters. So, and again, they had thousands of hours of phone calls, and you didn't hear one. And with the letters. So they piecemealed what they wanted. And again, you have to understand, Michael Dunn, never been in jail. Sat in a jail cell. And I can tell you this, and he would tell you if he was here, he was threatened. He was harassed. In jail. And it comes to a point where eventually it wore on him, and we're all human. And he may have said something that he regrets, but it was out of emotion. And again, he said many times in letters and phone calls, it's not black and white. He's never been racist. He's never been accused of racist. Matter of fact, the guys in the car even testified on cross-examination that night he never said anything racial. He never said anything of violence or disrespect or even raised his voice. So the media, and no offense to you guys, but has portrayed this as an argument, a white guy shooting a black kid over loud music. An argument is two people back and forth. And even the guys in the car said it wasn't an argument. And again, I want to break that perception. That's not what happened.
Was there ever a plea offered in this case, and did your client ever consider taking a deal?
Never. Never was it offered, and my client would have never accepted a plea offer.
You mentioned that this case would not be here, I think, because of George Zimmerman. What do you mean by that?
What I think is the way George Zimmerman happened and the media attention that it was global, and again, it's been compared. Mr. Dunn's case has been compared to George Zimmerman's case. As a matter of fact, I think they've put their pictures up in the news several times, where it's Mr. Dunn's face, George Zimmerman's face. The facts are extremely different. And the problem is with the media attention, and not critiquing you guys, but the global media attention, and then this happening on the heels of it. And then all of a sudden this case is now here on the heels of a not guilty with George Zimmerman, I think just escalated that political pressure and things like that that we spoke of.
That he would not be prosecuted, then, Mr. Dunn, I'm referring to, if there had not been a Zimmerman case.
I think if the detectives had done their jobs properly,
Mr.
don't think this case would have ever come forward.
Mr.
Mr. Strolla, I was curious, with the civil case, why did he settle before?
He did not. I'm so glad you brought that up. He absolutely did not settle. And I know the Davis family put in there that they were shocked that he did. There was never a phone call from the civil attorneys to Mr. Dunn. In fact, there are letters from Michael Dunn to the civil attorneys telling them, I am not agreeing to any settlement for any amount. And under Florida law, if a person is found not guilty using justifiable use of deadly force, they are precluded from seeking a civil settlement. And Mr. Dunn was adamant, do not settle, let the case go to trial. He will prevail under self-defense, which would mean the families would be entitled to zero. And I think it's the exact opposite. I believe they settled before trial because they knew if it's a not guilty verdict, they walk away with nothing under the law.
So that is a settlement, though, before trial?
But not an agreement on Mr. Dunn. You asked me if he agreed to it. He absolutely did not. This was between Mr. Phillips, his clients, and a civil firm that did not listen to Mr. Dunn's pleas not to settle.
Has the Dunn family reached out to the Davis family?
No, they have not.
Do they intend to?
I know that they wanted to, but because of some things that happened in the very beginning between Mr. Davis and Michael Dunn, they were a little nervous to do that. I know I reached out to them. Well, unfortunately, when we were in front of Judge Bass, Mr. Davis was staring down Michael Dunn, started walking to the gallery. Bailiffs had to stop him. At the next hearing, when we did our motion for indigency and costs, there was an outburst by Mr. Davis that basically went unrecognized by the court. And that's neither here nor there, but there was definitely some anger and animosity early on. I can tell you that I did reach out to Ms. McBath when I first came on the case. I actually spoke to her husband. She was giving a press interview and I didn't want to interrupt it. But I did extend my condolences from the Dunn family to the Davis family because, again, they're parents, I'm a parent, we understand it. And we, even with the facts being what they are and that what we allege happened, you still don't want someone to lose a child. No matter what happens in this case, you still have a young man that his life is gone and no matter what can't come back. And there's parents that are going to grieve. And I understand that. But I think they were a little apprehensive to reach out to the Davis family because of what transpired so early on.
Mr. Strolla, what's this been like for Michael Dunn to go from a man with no criminal record to being charged with premeditated first-degree murder?
Culture shock is to say the least. And that goes back to this reporter's question about some of the things that he said in letters and being racially biased. In fact, he's actually become quite friendly with some of the younger juveniles there. They can kind of talk through the vents. And once they kind of learned and talked to Michael Dunn and realized who he is and had conversations, they even indicated to him, oh, we thought you were this angry, mean white guy. And they've actually learned to understand him. That includes the correctional officers. So it was a culture shock. I mean, imagine you live a wonderful lifestyle on the beach. You have a family, friends. Next thing you know, you're being accused of premeditated murder. You're not allowed out on bond. People are threatening your life. People are banging on your doors and your walls. To say that he was in a state of shock is, again, to put it mildly.
Is he prepared for the possibility that he will never get back to that wonderful life that he had?
I don't think you can ever be prepared for it. He understands the consequences, but again, how do you prepare for something like that? I don't think anybody can.
I'm
Yes, sir.
curious, you were talking about the Zimmerman trial and how that may have influenced this. Do you believe that Angela Cory, who was the special prosecutor on that case, feels, again, she's an elected official, feels pressure in this case to somehow get a conviction because of the failure in the Zimmerman case?
Again, that's probably a question best left for Ms. Cory. My personal opinion, I think we're human. I think it plays into it. I think you have to look at that. Again, was it 1%? Was it 100%? You'd have to ask for Ms. Cory for that. And I kind of know what her answer would be. But again, we're all human beings. We all have emotions. And again, if you reverse the role to your job and said, well, if you reported on that one way, you may lose your job. It may cause you, in the back of your mind, to think, maybe I should switch my question up a little bit. And I don't mean to pick on you. I'm just responding to your question, not saying you would do that.
Do you know if Michael Dunn's fiancée or one was pressured by the defense?
By the defense?
By the prosecution.
Oh, my, no.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
By the prosecution, or possibly threatened with being charged with accessory.
That again, you're going to have to ask the state attorney's office, or you're going to have to ask Ms. Rauer herself.
Deal that she
No, if they had a deal, they'd have to disclose that, but I can tell you that there were certain things that happened where she was placed under a subpoena to go speak, and she was extremely nervous, and you could see that on the stand. But again, that's a question you're probably gonna have to ask Ms. Rauer.
Are they still planning to get married?
I don't know. Honestly, I've had other things to worry about with Mr. Dunn. I'm not talking about his relationship with Ms. Rauer.
If this jury deadlocks, or if he's convicted and it's overturned an appeal or any way, are you going to stay on the case, or are you going to have to withdraw now that doesn't look like they can pay you anymore?
That I don't know. Again, I'm not going to put the cart before the horse. We don't even have a verdict yet, so that's just one of the questions. You know, no disrespect. I can't answer that with any certainty because we're not there yet.
Mr. Strolla?
Yes, ma'am.
You've said that if not for the Zimmerman trial, we wouldn't be talking about this as we have. It's been said
As
that-
heavily.
As heavily,
Yes.
covered as heavily. It's
Yes.
also been said that if this was an issue between a black man and a black teenager, this would not be discussed. What are your thoughts on this?
I can tell you this, as we stand here right now, as we were there last night with the media coverage, there were other murder cases going on in this very building. And I believe one is where 2 officers were shot. And there was not one camera, not one question, not one media in that courtroom. So what I feel and what I think is absolutely irrelevant, I think actions speak louder than words. Last question. You good? All right.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
From jail, your client wrote, "This jail is full of blacks and they all act like thugs." This may sound a bit radical, but people would arm themselves and kill these effing idiots when they're threatening you. Eventually, they may take the hint and change their behavior. Are you saying that he has changed his perspective in that regard since he's been in jail?
I think that some of the people in jail have learned who Michael Dunn is, and that exact letter was written after an inmate walked by and said he was going to rape Mr. Dunn when he gets a hold of him. Thank you very much. When he gets a hold of him. Thank you guys very much. Thank you.